Hello, welcome to Jason Cavness Experience. I'm your host, Jason Cavness. I'm also CEO founder of Cavness HR. At Cavness HR, we deliver HR to companies with 49 or fewer people. And I'd like to welcome you to the Jason Cavness Experience Ho Chi Minh City edition. For the next 2 months, we're doing our podcast live from Ho Chi Minh City. And we want to thank Earth VC for powering this podcast. Earth VC is on a mission to unfuck the Earth. They're doing this by supporting breakthrough scientific research, empowering outlier founders to build enduring climate businesses, and investing in high-growth startups that decarbonize the world. Earth VC empowers founders who are ambitious, breakthrough, and are committed. Earth VC is investing in the pre-seed to Series A round. If you think you might be a match, reach out to them at Rebuild at Earth VC. So Cedric, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man.
So Cedric, I'm gonna start with something personal.
Sure.
You're adopted, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell that adoption story? Like, did you find out when you were like a little kid you adopted, or like going on life? How did that work?
Sure. I mean, it's nothing overly sensitive, so no worries. Happy to share. I mean, I was adopted basically right after I was born, at least to my knowledge, since I was a baby. But yeah, basically my parents had an affinity for Vietnam. My grandfather was a general surgeon back in his day and basically would come to Vietnam to do humanitarian trips. And so that's how my family kind of came to Vietnam in the first place. And then, yeah, essentially more than 30 years ago, my parents came, adopted me, and then I think...
And you adopted here in Vietnam?
In Ho Chi Minh City, in Vietnam, yeah.
And then they moved you to France?
No, so funny story is I've actually never lived in France. My family has a summer house there, so that's where we go in the summers. But I've actually never lived full time in France. So right after I was adopted, my parents were actually living in Africa. So we were living in Botswana at the time. So basically went from Vietnam to Africa right after.
Man, it sounds like your parents have an interesting life story too, living all the world.
Yeah, maybe that's for another podcast. But yeah, absolutely. I think they've been very fortunate. I think I've been very fortunate. I think it's 8th country I've lived in now. And it's really thanks to them, actually.
Do you have a favorite country you've lived in so far?
I get asked that a lot. And I think the conclusion that I've drawn is that there is no perfect country. I think I like to enjoy the different aspects of different countries for the different qualities that they have. So Vietnam, we enjoy relatively affordable living. I've lived in Thailand as well. I studied in the US. So every country has its own charm and things that it adds and value and so on. So no favorite country, short answer.
Yeah, I think one thing, like I've been in a lot of countries myself. I've yet to be a country where you said, like, man, these people suck, right? Every country you go to, the people like this is great.
Correct. Absolutely. People are great, or something about the culture is great, or just being in a place with energy, or just, yeah, I think it's very enriching all around. And I think it just makes you realize that there's so many beautiful places and many great people around.
Now, how old were you when you found out you were adopted? Was that like
I don't know the actual age per se, but it was relatively young. I mean, my parents were very upfront about it. They're like, we are not your parents by blood, but we are your mom and dad.
Yeah, we're your parents.
For all intents and purposes, we are your parents. So it's just, and then they explained to me, your parents unfortunately could not take care of you when you were a baby, and so, but we were very fortunate to adopt you, and you are our son.
Now in Vietnam, do they treat you like with a stigma, something like, oh, you don't have real parents, or is adopted treated like a simple, like a outlier thing, so to speak? Or
it's a good question. Vietnam is the world. So I'm French by nationality, by passport. So whenever I'm in France, people don't really consider me French either. I always get like, oh, you speak really good French. And I'm like, thanks, I guess.
I mean, that is kind of assaulting though, right? I mean, speaking your whole life, I'm presuming so.
Correct. And then, I come to Vietnam or Asia, and then it's funny because whenever I'm in Asia, in Thailand, they'll be like, oh, you kind of look Thai or you look Filipino or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not. But then, when I tell them I'm adopted from Vietnam, they're like, oh, but, you don't really look Vietnamese either. So it's kind of like in this weird place where I'm in an other in some respects sometimes.
Yeah. And do you have any brothers and sisters?
I have a sister who's also adopted, also from Vietnam.
Okay.
People say we look alike, even though by blood, actually, we are completely unrelated.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the nurture aspect of
Okay.
growing up together.
Yeah, that's great. You had like these two people just come in your life and like, basically like take you on the wing and take care of you. Like,
Right.
that's very good. So this is my second time in Vietnam. I came the first time in September. And this is kind of embarrassing because I'm a big history buff. I know about the Vietnam War, the
Mm,
French, but I didn't realize how big influence France had on Vietnam until
mm,
September, like the architectural buildings, the food.
sure.
Can you talk about something like how the French are still influencing Vietnam now?
I mean, sure. I mean, like we're right now we're in Thao for example. There's a lot of foreigners here, a lot of French people in this particular area. I mean, I think even if you look at Vietnamese language, there are a lot of French words or French roots from French words in the Vietnamese language that they still use today. Whether it's cafe or other kind of words that have integrated into the Vietnamese language. For example, coffee culture is very big here. I think they got that from the French. Even just sitting on small stools and people watching is a very French thing. Drinking your coffee in the morning. No cigarettes here, but there is the coffee part. So I think there are definitely aspects of French culture that are still ingrained here, but I think the Vietnamese have taken it and really made it their own.
Yeah, speaking of coffee, like I have no idea how much I drink coffee in the United States after drinking coffee here. It's
I,
just so good here.
I mean, coffee in the US is very diluted down. Let's put
Yeah,
it that way. And I'm not even a huge coffee
yeah,
drinker, but I've definitely learned to appreciate the art of coffee from
yeah.
Vietnam.
And so much good coffee. Like I walk here, like 10-minute walk, and I pass at least 10 coffee stalls in the
Right.
street.
And that's actually the dream of most Vietnamese people is, hey, I want to own my own tea shop or a coffee
Mhm.
shop one day, invite all my friends and just have a good time.
Talk about this too, like how put this question. So in the United States, Vietnam's of course a communist country.
Sure.
But when I came to September, now it's like it just amazed me how entrepreneurial it is, a small business. Like it's like
Sure.
everyone opens the door in the morning, they're selling something, right?
Yep.
And I
Yep.
think most people in America like I think they create Vietnam, but Soviet Union 1950s, right?
Correct.
Like
For sure.
bureaucratic, do what I say, but it's
Yep.
nothing like that at all. Can you talk about that?
In some respects, I would say politically, Vietnam is still a communist country, but in terms of its economic system, it is very much a capitalist kind of driven economy. Even more so, I would say, in Ho Chi Minh City, more so than even in the north. But overall, I think, yes, you're right. It's kind of the Confucian values of you want to work hard today to provide your family a better future in the future. So I think those kind of Confucian values have translated well into entrepreneurship, and we've seen that as well in China and other similar kind of Confucian-esque countries as well, like Singapore or Hong Kong and places like that.
And how often do you go to France now?
I try to go back once a year, usually during the summer.
Mhm.
So usually that's when all the family kind of gathers and we spend time together.
And
Um,
your parents that live there or they live here in Vietnam?
So my parents are a little bit all over as well. So they're kind of semi-retired these days. So they used to have a business here in Vietnam, also in education, but now they spend about half of their time in France, and then the rest of their time in Vietnam and traveling around the world. So they're just chilling.
And say the name of your startup.
OOOLAB.
So does that name, does it mean anything? Is it just a random name you came up with, or does it actually have some significance to it?
So yeah, that's a good question. We get that out actually a fair amount. So we originally started as a tutoring company called One on One, which has three O's. But actually, we pivoted to become a product company after we were approached by another education group who was interested in buying us. We didn't go through with that acquisition, but we learned a lot, and basically we pivoted from becoming this one-on-one English tutoring, soft skills tutoring company to becoming a software as a service product company. And we decided to keep the triple O because we like the sound ooh, because it made us think of like when we realize something or we think something's cool, we go ooh, and then so it kind of stuck, and so we call ourselves OOOLAB.
So this going back in the day, I found a post you did on LinkedIn maybe 5 months ago where you like very critical of SaaS companies, right? Specifically their lack of customer service.
Hmm,
So can you talk to you personally why you think customer service and a SaaS startup is so important?
sure. I think let's distill why I think customer service isn't a big of a thing in software companies. I think it's because markets and entrepreneurs and business, management teams have been pushed to think that you should only care about high margin software kind of services. But what they forget is that, especially when you're working on mid to, because we focus more on enterprise, the human aspect, helping giving a helping hand to your client and making sure that they get value from your tool very quickly is very important. And I think a lot of SaaS companies have been kind of brainwashed in a way to think that, oh, just build a self-service tool, your clients will get value from it so long as you build it right. But my view is that it's never really that simple. And especially in Southeast Asia, tech adoption is still lagging, I would say, the rest of the world, especially in SaaS. So you need that service component, you need that hand holding, you need to take care of your clients. And so I'm not seeing this as much as it probably should be in this region.
You know what drives me crazy? Like you use a product or service, right? And they make a change, right? Like example, they change, like before we had to do like let's say steps 1, 2, 3.
Sure.
They changed ABC.
Correct. Yeah.
And they say they put it out, but they don't put it out right.
Sure.
It's like they think it's intuitive that you're gonna know. Like, how am I gonna know? I've been using 1, 2, 3 for the last 3 years, and all of a sudden you change it.
Correct.
And I have problems, and you act like I'm the stupid one.
Correct. And then if I try to ask you for help, they're like, yeah, just check out our FAQ. And then you have to search some keywords and you don't even know what you're looking for.
Here's a video.
Right. There's a video. That's if you're lucky. Video is if you're like, if they even care a little bit about you. But usually they'll just be like, oh, look at this handbook thing, read in page 500 or whatever. And you're just like, what the hell? So I think there's a better way. I'm not saying that we figured it out, but we think that talking to a real human is already a good place to start.
Yeah. So for your company, talk about the importance of you making sure your customers have the best customer service possible.
I mean, for us, so again, we focus more on mid to enterprise level clients. So the nice thing about that is that it allows us to have budget to be able to do that, which means that whenever we work on a deal, inherently within our, let's call them margins, we make sure that we have a dedicated account manager. You can actually call them or contact them or email them. And so you get that face-to-face kind of interaction rather than just going through a chatbot or some automated AI tool. So for us, that personnel kind of handholding is very important.
So you have I might be wrong, but you have like customers, like you're in like 21 countries, right?
That's right.
And so how do you like manage like customer service, running the company through the different time zones, different culture, different personalities? How do you do that?
Sure. So for us, I think what's important is that we usually try to align with the clients as we are negotiating, let's say with a new client. We'll tell them, look, when do you guys typically operate? Because we're not at a big enough size where we can guarantee 24/7, like service around the clock. So what we tell them is like, give us your core hours where you really need us to be there. Of course, if the system is down or the platform is down, of course, we're going to fix it and be there. But usually the account manager will adapt to the times of the client. So most of our team is based in Vietnam, but let's say we have a client in the US or a client in Europe. That person will work specific shifts or times dedicated to that client in that time zone.
So I think most people know what IQ is, EQ is. But what's SQ? Like, what's the skills quotient or skills? What is
Absolutely. It is not talked about, and by no means is it a popular term. Actually, I was actually doing more research on it, even just preparing for this particular podcast. So, my background is in education. I've been brought up with entrepreneur parents who've worked in education. And the biggest gap between the real world is turning this knowledge into real skills and capabilities. And I think now that I'm working with lots of different companies, the common theme that I'm seeing is there is no North Star metric to know whether or not your team has the adequate skills to be able to do and excel at what they're good at. So let's take an example of our company. For the longest time, and I still haven't solved it, I wanted to make sure, like, how can I gauge whether or not my engineers are actually good engineers? Or how can I gauge if my salespeople actually know what they're doing? And so there was no real way, because engineering is, yes, okay, you can write code and issue tickets, but it's not so black and white. Sales is even more nuanced, I would say, because yes, okay, you can check how many calls they do, you can check their pipeline, but there is no objective measure to know whether a salesperson has the adequate skills to perform well. So the sales skills quotient is a measure or a framework, an approach to try to quantify the level of skills in an organization and distill it down to one number. Just like in customer service, we have NPS or we have CSAT. I'm trying to, well, no, not even just me, this is based on the work of other folks. trying to really figure out what is that North Star metric that will allow a CEO or an organization to really figure out, do they have the right people for the right jobs, and do those people have the right skills? And so the skills quotient is trying to measure that. And so it can be something as simple as, okay, you are a salesperson. These are the 5 capabilities or competencies you need to know as a salesperson. This is how you rank on each skill. Therefore, your skills quotient is 70 out of 100 or whatever the number is. So it's an attempt to distill and simplify something that's actually very complex into a number that everybody can kind of benchmark.
And you have a co-founder, correct?
I do, yes.
So if you listen or watch or read like the startup stuff, it says one of the top reasons startups fail is the co-founder conflict. Can you just tell us, like how you and your co-founder found each other and how this relationship is working out so far?
Sure. So my co-founder's name is Edgar. He's actually from the US as well. And originally when we met, was actually I was between, my family had just exited their previous business, which I had been a part of. And I was looking to start a new business in the tutoring space. And essentially, I was looking for somebody with experience in education, building curriculum, skills that I did not possess. So I was looking for somebody with complementary skill sets. And essentially, I met Edgar, who's my co-founder, at a coding school initially. And I liked his background because he had worked for other education companies. He had worked for this coding school. And so I reached out to him saying like, hey, can you help me do 2 to 3 months of market research on this new business idea that I'm considering? I'll pay you for the time. And then, we did the research. We figured out that it was probably a viable business. And then I was like, hey, do you want to be a co-founder on this business? And it kind of just started off in that way.
And can you talk some about another thing they say, like never do 50-50 equity split, Sure. Can you talk about how you and your co-founder Edgar like decided like the right equity split for y'all?
Great question. So I 100% agree that equity split should never be equal. I think like many things in life, many relationships, nothing is ever split equally anyways. So I think what we did well with my co-founder Edgar was that we really separated our roles out very clearly. So Edgar's expertise was more on the academics, the curriculum. He's a much better recruiter than I am. He's much better at operations versus I was more on the sales, on the operations, on the finance side, and the customer service side. So we really split our roles accordingly. And then what we did was Edgar did not really need to invest much in terms of funding into the business. So we said, okay, we will take some of the financing risk on our end. And therefore, this is how we're going to split the equity accordingly.
Next, can you discuss like, I might be making this up, but like, how do you decide the next country you're going to go into? What's the thought process of that?
To be frank, it's not very clearly defined. We usually just follow the opportunities. So, there's this term called product market fit. And usually one of the ways to know if you have good product market fit is that essentially the market is pulling you. So we have a sales team today. They do their typical outbound sequence and motions where they message people, they call people, they send emails, etc. And we've identified that actually a lot of the interest in the services and products that we offer come from outside Vietnam. And more specifically, they come from markets that tend to be more mature in the SaaS domain. So it's places like Europe, it's places like Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam, actually not so much. Propensity to spend on software in Southeast Asia is still quite low. So really, it's wherever we get prospects and leads at this stage. I think moving forward in the future, we're going to set in place a more, I think, disciplined kind of approach, which really is more looking at the propensity to spend on, learning management systems or training tools, see where there are gaps in that market where we think we can add value, and just taking a bit of a more traditional approach in that regard. But today we don't do that, to be frank.
And so you're considered like, I guess, an EdTech company?
Yeah. So
what is that? What is EdTech?
We're in a weird space where we do training for education companies. Like we provide our learning management system to company. Okay, so let's start maybe with your question. Let's start with big picture. So what is EdTech? For me, EdTech is anything that utilizes technology to facilitate or improve the delivery of learning in all its forms. These days, I think we are a lot less EdTech and much more corporate training tech, or L&D in a way, I would say. And specifically within this segment, we focus more on sales training and customer service training. So I guess you could say we're a little bit more sales enablement or corporate training these days. But historically, EdTech has been more for the education sector itself, meaning higher education, K-12s, enrichment centers, after-school tutoring, and things like that. That is how we started, but that is not currently kind of our main focus today. So I'd say today our focus is more on the corporate training side and on the sales enablement side.
So who is like your quote unquote perfect customer?
Great question. Well, right now we're actually working on a deal with what I would define as a perfect customer. And without naming them yet to avoid any issues, but they are a publicly listed company. They do about 9 billion euros in revenue, and they have about 600,000 employees. And today they have no tool or no effective tool for training their 600,000 employees. And this company today is quite pivotal because they provide customer service and other services to Fortune 500 companies. So they need to make sure that their teams are extremely well trained to be able to handle the issues of their clients. But again, they don't have a platform, they don't have a training, they don't have a structured training approach. And so for us, ideal ticket size for that type of company is a couple $1 million a year in average contract value. Takes us 6 months to a year to close a deal like that, but that is really the sweet spot because then we have budget to do a great job. We get to keep these clients for a long time, and we get to grow internally within these kind of companies.
And as for your clients, a new client comes on, is like, do they pay monthly, upfront fee? I guess it depends each situation.
Yeah, it really varies. I think one of the value kind of propositions we offer is we do give a lot of flexibility in that regard. Again, we try to be very customer focused. In general, though, I would say our business model is not very different from many SaaS companies. So it's going to be a lot of subscription-based stuff. If client wants to pay monthly, annually, really it's up to them. We push, obviously, as most companies would, more annual or quarterly pricing. But if a company wants to do monthly pricing, we're very happy with that as well. So it really depends on them.
And do you mainly like deal with, we'll say, like private corporations, like a Coca-Cola, or more like universities and private schools, so to speak, or education?
Sure. So I would say these days we're more skewed towards corporate. So yeah, kind of like the Coke. I mean, I'd love to get Coca-Cola, but companies like that. In the beginning, though, we did start to be more on the education side. So in Vietnam, we work with some of the largest language schools here. We work with, after school tutoring companies and things like that. But now, unfortunately, what we've seen is that the propensity to spend money on software for education companies is quite low. So that's why we've tried to shift towards corporate slightly. It's unfortunate. I would love to serve more education companies, but the reality is they don't want to pay for it. And sometimes they're a pain in the butt, to be very frank.
So I'm assuming there's quite a few companies doing the same thing you do. Let's suppose it's you and 3 companies like you competing for a contract. Like, how do you convince this corporation to go with you?
Sure. So usually in our sales process, which I don't think is honestly anything overly crazy, we will usually filter for that. So I think it's been very rare that we've ever been in a situation where we have to compete on the same project with 3 other companies. We don't usually put ourselves in that position. But if we were to put ourselves in that position, we almost never compete on price. We always compete on value. So whatever the client's goals are, let's imagine that they want to increase their revenue by, 10%. Most other competitors will almost never focus on that. They'll just tell them, here's the price, whatever, 100K a year, enjoy. But for us, it's like, okay, we don't want to take your money if we're not sure that we're going to add value. So if you invest 100K working with us, I expect that you're going to get at least 300K in some sort of return. So usually when we compete with those competitors, we compete on value and we compete on quality of service. We don't position ourselves as the cheapest, and I never will admit that we are the cheapest either, but I will compete on, we will do the damn best job out of all of our other competitors. So I will give you the best customer service. if I need to be, I will be personally involved in this deal and make sure that you guys have a very smooth migration onboarding. Like I will move heaven and earth to make sure that we achieve what it is that you are trying to achieve. And I think that's where our clients kind of value the kind of input that we bring.
So you've been around, this company's been around for 3 years, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And like how many people have working for you right now?
We have, I think, between 60 to 70 staff.
It's like
full-time staff.
Okay, so how do you go about this, right? Of course, you first start out, few people working for you, you're
Right.
hands-on to everything.
Yep.
But the more and more people you hire, the less you got to get away, right?
Yes.
Less you involved in culture, all the data decisions.
Yes.
Like, how do you like make that transition from quote unquote startup founder like to a real CEO, right?
Sure. So I think it really starts, well, I think I can only really share what we've done in our company. So we started off really hiring generalists. Let's call them expert generalists in the beginning. People who could wear different hats, do different things, which included myself. And then, as we got our first 2-3 large deals, we started very slowly to go from expert generalists to more specialists. And so now within our company today, I think, we've hired a good mix of talent. That means that folks are able to really focus on what they're good at. And now I also focus on at least what I believe that I'm good at, which is really meeting with clients, helping them solve their problems. So I spend a lot of time on the sales side, a lot of time on the customer service side. And essentially now everybody in the company is very focused on what they're good at and less so on things that they're not good at. So I'm an okay recruiter, but my co-founder Edgar is a far better recruiter, for example. So when it comes to hiring, managing all the back office operations, all that, I leave that all to him. And so I think we've done a very good job of separating out these roles, both for ourselves as co-founders, but also within our kind of direct reports and team as well. So now we're at a stage where everybody's kind of specialized, and we're going to kind of scale by adding more specialists than generalists. But I would still say that within our company, we have about maybe 30 or 20% are still expert generalists, and then 70-80% are now more specialists.
And have you like bootstrapped the company so far?
Yes.
Any plan to get a fundraiser anytime soon? Just gonna
to be perfectly candid, nope.
Okay.
We're not raising. We've been approached by many funds. In the very beginning, that was a path that we considered, and I've done my 100 pitches, been rejected 100 times. I've been through that.
Yeah.
That was fun. Or not.
Yeah.
And then, but now we've decided, when we started this company, and I'm perfectly happy to admit it here, we set our goal that we wanted to build a $50 million business. We didn't want to build a unicorn. It was never our intention. We wanted to build a good business that we were proud of at a big enough scale where we felt we were making impact. So when I set off with the team, I was very clear. I was like, look, guys, we're going to build this company to a $50 million valuation. And then at some point, we're probably going to exit this, and you guys are all going to get some money. And then we'll move on to the next thing, if there is a next thing. And you guys hopefully will have learned a lot during the journey. And, hopefully you'll make a nice chunk of money at the very end as well to reward you for that.
So of all the things you do in life, hundreds of millions of things, why be an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. And some days I wish I wasn't. I think it's, coming back to, you asked me about adoption and whether I think my family has played a tremendously large impact on my life and has influenced and shaped the way I view the world. And so I think we have to kind of zoom out. So my father's background was very corporate. And when he was, I think in his 40s, decided to launch his own business. And he said, look, you're going to have a lot of freedoms in certain respects. You can make your own decisions. You don't need to report to the man. But at the same time, you're also going to be, it's going to be extremely stressful, strenuous. You're not going to have a life probably for a couple of years. But in the end, it's all about the journey. So if that is something that you're interested in and you want to live that journey of freedom and being able to kind of make your own decisions, then that's the life for you. And so I studied in the US specifically because in my mind, when I was like 16 or 17 or whatever, I was like, okay, I think one day I want to have my own business and I want to go to the US because I want to learn this entrepreneurial culture. I want to see how other people are doing it. I've seen my parents do it. I want to learn from the best. And I want to be able to have that freedom one day myself as well. And, it's definitely been a roller coaster, but I think, we're trending now towards that direction. Next year, we're aiming to be properly profitable on an accounting basis. And I think that's when we're really going to achieve that freedom. And then really we do whatever we want.
I have a joke that I say, like, before you become an entrepreneur, you should take some kind of mental health test.
Yes,
Because there has to be something off with you if you want to
it's
go through
true.
this.
It's true. Yeah, I think, most entrepreneurs have a chip on their shoulder. Like there's something in their life. And I think for me, it's the fact that, I'm adopted. Technically, I come from nothing. And I think I want to prove to myself and the world that if you have the right environment, if you are quote unquote raised right, and you have a good nurturing environment that can help you fulfill your potential, then a lot of things are possible. And I think that's also why I went into kind of education and training, because I feel like I want to be able to help others achieve similar things as well, and not have to spend, abysmal sums of money in order to achieve that, hopefully.
So this might be a question more for your parents, but maybe you can answer like, so your adopted parents are French, you're Vietnamese. How do your parents, as far as like balance, being French and also making sure you like learn about your own culture, so to speak?
I think my parents have been very open-minded about that ever since from the start. I mean, to be candid, actually, I'm the one, well, they were doing a business in Vietnam, which it was more of a business decision than it was a kind of personal decision. So they set up here because the market was good, timing was good, etc. But it was actually more me who said, look, actually, you guys are launching this business. I'd love to be involved to see what it's like to grow business. It just so happened that it was in Vietnam at the time. And then I was like, okay, this is kind of I can kill two birds with one stone. I can kind of better understand where I come from. And at the same time, I can get great lessons in entrepreneurship and learn in a market that's growing very quickly. So it wasn't intentional. It was really more, okay, there's the benefit that I get to learn where I come from. I still don't feel like I am Vietnamese inside personally, from kind of these varied experiences. It's cliche, but I really do think in a way I am a citizen of the world. So yeah, that's really it.
And is there a thing, I don't know the term, is there a thing where if someone's like Vietnamese, but they're born outside Vietnam, they come to Vietnam, they're kind of like,
yeah, there's a term. It's called being. My tones are probably going to be terrible. It's being called Viet Q, which basically means usually that essentially you're a Vietnamese person who's spent extensive periods of time outside of Vietnam, whether that was kind of like in your early life and like you're born abroad and then you come back to Vietnam. So the definition is a little bit loose, at least from my understanding. But I don't think the Vietnamese would consider me Viet Q because I think I've spent most of my life abroad, just generally speaking. And I don't really have Vietnamese like ties per se here. So they don't really view me as that.
And do like native Vietnamese like kind of look down on these big Viet Q?
I think in the younger generation, not really. I think
Okay.
younger generations are tend to be a bit more liberal. I think maybe the older generation, I don't think there's like a stigma, but they view you as a slightly different person. Let's
Okay.
just put it that way. I don't think it's about being good or bad. It's just like you're not quite Vietnamese,
Yeah.
but you are Vietnamese-ish.
Okay.
So we like that about you, but you're not exactly like one of us.
Like
That's kind of how
you're
they
not
view.
100% pure, like maybe like 82%.
Correct. You're kind of just this mixed bag, but we still like you because you're Vietnamese, but you're not exactly like us. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how they view it. But they don't view it through a lens of like good or bad. It's just more like, okay, you're just, Asian Vietnamese culture is very, very much about putting people in boxes. So Vietnamese language is very hierarchical, for example. So, you have your uncle, but you have like an older uncle, younger uncle, whatever. So they use these descriptors to put you in boxes so that they can relate to who you are. So for them, it's like, okay, you are a Viet Q person. There's no judgment attached to that. It's just that that's what you are. That's just how they relate to you.
So let's go to your days at Uber, right? But I saw it just me you had a very successful career at Uber. Can you talk about your time at Uber and how that experience like has helped you become a good CEO?
I mean, I wouldn't say I had a long stint at Uber. I mean, I was mostly working when I was young in college and stuff like that. But for me, that was really a lesson in hustling, really. So these were the earlier days of Uber in general. And they were actively recruiting on campuses to try to get more drivers, more rides. So really that taught me how to be resourceful, how to do more marketing, promoting, which I think are important skills when you want to be an entrepreneur. Most entrepreneurs, I think, focus a lot on the product and the technology, the innovation, which don't get me wrong, are very important. But products don't sell themselves, which is why you're doing this podcast, build awareness, and so on. And I think that experience, as well as the experience of coming to work in Vietnam and getting more exposure to sales and marketing, I think really benefited me because today that's kind of what I excel at. So yeah.
So I think a lot of CEOs, when they come to promoting people, they promote the wrong people, right?
Mm.
So how do you make sure you promote the right people? Like, how do you make sure you don't promote the person that kind of like just doing the average job, might be loud and obnoxious, and the other person that kind of introverted and actually adding value to everything? Like, how do you do that?
Sure. So by nature, I think I'm more of an introvert in general. So I think I'm less prone to promoting folks that are just loud for the sake of being loud. Within our company, we have one of our values is results are king or queen. So for us, what that means is it's not about how you do your politics or whatever. It's really, are you doing your job well? Are you contributing? Are you a team player? And so we have objective measures to be able to see that, whether it's through, feedback from other team members or our own observations or actually the results themselves. Where possible, we're not perfect by any means, but we try to be as impartial as possible and really just focus on what are the key results that have been achieved. And we let that speak for itself.
So what's your definition of lifelong learning? Now, why do you think so many people stop learning at whatever age they stop?
Sure. I think, as lifelong, I don't even know if lifelong learning is really the right, I know it's a popular term, but I don't even know if that's really the right term. And I don't have an answer for you for whether that's the right term or not. I think for me, what I've observed in society at large is that we think that education stops basically when you finish high school or university, and then that somehow that's sufficient for you to go get a job and do well. My view is that learning never stops. And in fact, when we stop growing as humans, usually that's when we die. If you look at countries where folks live the longest, it's always places where people have a sense of purpose, sense of community, usually, lead a relatively healthy lifestyle in terms of like fitness and dietary kind of stuff, but also that aspect of growing, continuously learning. And I think, Singapore is a very good example of that, where they, even if you're past your 40s, you want to take courses, the state will sponsor courses for you up to 90% of the value of the course, because they want their Singapore was built on the principles that we need to have the best people in order to build a great country or great economy. And so they're really walking the talk in that respect. And I think, for me at least, learning should never stop. The day we stop being curious, the day we want to not learn anymore is when internally we start dying, essentially. So yeah, it definitely is past 22 years old when you finish college. It's not even defined by the degrees you have, in my opinion. You can have a love of learning without any fancy degrees and still be, a very learned person.
So from your point of view, you bring up a good point. I think so many of us, we stop being curious at a young age. How do we incentivize or influence people to keep that curiosity?
There's that quote, right, that growing up is a trap. And I think the mindset should always be that we should remain kids in that respect. As we get older, we're like, oh, you have to be mature, you have to be responsible. But that doesn't have to be at the detriment of being curious and wanting to learn things. We're told to live, as we get older, we have like this sequence of things in life that we're supposed to do. And I personally don't like it. I don't like to follow that thing. For me, I want to live life on my own terms. I think that we should keep that kind of young childhood mindset of, having unbounded curiosity, asking stupid questions. Like, I actually love when people ask stupid questions because they're rarely stupid questions, actually. So I think the education system, our approach to parenting, all of these things should try to nurture for as long as humanly possible these questions and these curiosities in children and even in adults. And we should be encouraged to do that.
From your point of view, what should the purpose of college university be? Should it be like help you find a job, teach how to socialize, teach how to think? Like what should be the purpose of university or college?
Good question. For me, I think the purpose of learning is to develop critical thinking skills, to be able to think for yourself, learning how to learn and unlearn in certain cases. And really, and for me, I think what college was useful for was also to discover who I thought I could be and who I did not want to be. Often in life, we're told to find role models, which I think is very important. But I also think we should try to identify folks or lifestyles that we also don't want to have. Sometimes it's easier to know what you don't want than it is to know what you want. And so I think for me, college helped with that for me to understand who I am, who I want to be, who I aspire to be, and who I definitely don't want to be. At the same time, developing those critical thinking skills. And of course, I think I also speak from a position of privilege where I didn't have $200,000 of college debt. I was fortunate that I could have help from my parents to sponsor that and support me in that regard. So yes, if for some folks, if we're looking at, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have to make sure that obviously college can pay the bills and that you can actually, live and, not live under a bridge. So that's, meeting the initial needs. But then at a more higher level, I would say it's all the other things that I mentioned before that.
You think that time will ever come where, YouTube University, for lack of a better term, replaces college?
I mean, I think in many ways it kind of has in a way. I mean, if any, I don't think I've had any college course where I didn't have to use YouTube videos in general. So I think technology is here to complement and not to replace. I think most pure technology folks are always under the impression that technology will replace humans for various different things. I've always taken the approach that we should work together and that together we will unlock synergy or we will better ourselves. So for me, I think technology will not take over the place of universities. I think just the role of universities themselves will evolve from being places of knowledge to places of the application of knowledge and where you then go practice these skills before you enter the real world. And even, okay, I mean, I didn't graduate that long ago, but even then it was still very much about knowledge and memorization and knowing things. But now that information is unlimited, basically, and that AI can now answer almost any question that we might have, now it's really, okay, how do we use this knowledge in ways that are going to be beneficial both for our careers, but for humanity as a whole? And so I think the role of universities will change in that regard. And that's kind of the discussion that we had at RMIT a couple of months back, where, what is the role of AI in higher education? And the consensus generally was that we're going to continue working together. It is not going to replace colleges or universities, just both are going to have to evolve.
So next, talk about AI. Do you think AI is going to be a positive or negative in the field of education?
I mean, I think overall, just like the calculator, it will be a net positive, but like anything, it's how you use it. Any new technology is always about the application rather than the underlying technology itself. So I think for us, or at least our view of this, is that AI is here to help again, but not to replace. And I'm personally not pro AI replacing teachers and things like that. That's definitely not my stance. But at the same time, I don't know what the future holds. I like to quote Dune, where Frank Herbert's view was that, at some point in the future, this was 10,000 years in the future, humans, and he called them thinking machines, go to war, whatever, kind of Terminator style. But the main conclusion from that story is that humans realized that technology or AI could only take us so far. The more important thing was how would us as humans improve ourselves and become better versions of ourselves using technology. And I think that is likely the future that we're headed to, hopefully.
So what's your take on this? Let's suppose the eighth grade student is similar world. They have to report, I don't know, like space rocks on Mars, whatever.
Mm.
Do you think, they should be allowed to use ChatGPT? Do they have to like do other research to own? What's your take on that, those kind of things?
I think they should. I think so. This is a very similar way to how we approach interviews. So in our interview process, for example, we usually do two formal interviews, and then we do what was called a performance task. And in a performance task, we ask a candidate to actually do something that they would do on the real job. And I think using your example, I think kids should be taught how to use the tools safely and properly. But the reality is that we live in a world where these tools exist. So restricting them is not going to help.
They're going to use them.
They're going to use them.
It just might, are they smart enough to cover it up?
Correct. And I don't think, and the test should not be, can they cover it up? The test should be, how can we test their application of the knowledge and the skills, knowing that they're going to use these tools anyways, but we formulate these tests, quizzes, homeworks, whatever they may be, in ways that add value for the learner so that they take away something from it as they're using these tools. And it can be something as simple as like, okay, use this tool, do your research, whatever. But then if you had to do it again, more efficiently using the same tools and doing the same approach, what would you do differently? And it would be interesting to see how an 8-year-old kid would reapproach the same problem a second time in a more effective way, still using the same tools. I think there's much more to learn from that than trying to see whether they memorize whatever the elements of the periodic table or whatever of this asteroid that they're doing a report on.
So looking at your crystal ball, from your point of view, what would be the best case scenario of the combination of AI and education?
I mean, I think it's going to be similar to what we've seen in some movies where we have a personalized tutor that is always with us, that is infinitely available for us to ask questions to, that will basically help us supplement our knowledge and experiences, but as a kind of like a co-pilot in a way. But it will be tailored to each of us very specifically, and it will work with us to understand what our potential is or where our skills lie, and then really nurture in that direction without being overly imposing.
So do you think there's risk of maybe like this AI tool maybe like increasing the gap between like rich and poor? Like rich has the money to buy these tools, poor people don't have much, and like
don't have access.
Yeah, and like in the States, the big cities, even if you're like in a poor neighborhood, you have access to internet.
It's true.
You live in the world, there's no internet access. Do you think that even widens the gap even more?
I do spend a lot of time thinking about accessibility, equity, and things like that as well. It's true. My view right now, okay, we are running a for-profit business, but I think, in my view, education should be very similar to like Khan Academy and how Saul Khan is approaching education. I think in the future, my ideal future is that, with Elon Musk's, Starlink, hopefully will provide more access to internet around the world. The price of devices generally are becoming more affordable. So hopefully an ideal future is one where having access to the internet is almost a universal right, just like drinking water. And that, the cost of access to devices is materially lower, and that essentially AI should be embedded on all of these devices anyways. So in term, actually, I do think it will exacerbate disparities between rich and poor. Actually, I do think so. But hopefully in the medium and the longer term, as the cost of technology becomes cheaper, it should become more widely accessible. Just like today, anybody can buy a calculator with relative ease. I would imagine that it would be something similar, hopefully.
So here's a question for you. So obviously our tech's getting better and better. Like, who knows what's going to be in the next 50 years. As we might have neural links, all kind of crazy stuff going on.
Sure.
So tech's without that getting better. But from your point of view, has the human race been getting smarter? Like, is a human from the year 25 BC, are we like 10 times smarter than that person? Or do you think human intelligence will basically like stay the same through all these thousands of years or billions of years, how long this we've been on this earth?
Good question. So there are times when I'm like, oh, the state of affairs in the world is crap. Like things are going to shit. I don't know if I can swear, but
yeah.
sometimes what I do is I try to kind of what you said. I try to zoom out. I try to look objectively at like, okay, how has the human condition varied over the last couple thousand years? And if you look, so there's a book that I read called Factfulness. And it's really just a book about different facts about how humanity has progressed. And if you look at it, for the most part, I think humanity has progressed. Our living standards are better. Now, it's not to say that we definitely don't live in a utopia yet by any means, right? But I think as a whole, technology has allowed us to live better lives. But now we're dealing with different problems that we had before, right? So like 1,000 years ago, there's no social media and stuff like that. And the issues that stem from social media did not exist. They had other problems. They didn't have those problems. And I think, with any new advent of new technology, it will also add its own layer of complexities and problems. So I don't think technology will remove all problems in general. I think technology will create more problems, but I think overall, in terms of living standards and human progress, it has been an upward trend. And if we look at kind of, facts overall, I believe that we're trending in that direction.
Yeah, so kind of subject. A lot of people say social media is taking over the world. Like, there's a picture one day, someone put social media, like everyone on the train with the phone in their hand.
Sure.
No one's talking to each other. And someone like came back like a day later and did a picture from the 1940s with everyone with a paper in front of them.
Newspaper, yeah.
Like nothing's changed. Like people still want to be distracted, right?
Yes, yes. I think, it's very hard to do. And like when we started our business, we always wanted to do a business that we considered was a force for good. So if I had just wanted to make money, I would have got into fintech or whatever, crypto or something like that. Like education, like learning is hard. It takes time. So yes, it's possible to build businesses that are extremely lucrative on the bad habits of humanity. It's so easy to do that. But then we have to, I ask myself moral and ethical questions on a regular basis. Like, is what we're doing generally good? I think it is. But, using the example of social media and newspapers, we're always going to have the same habits. There's, you could be selling cigarettes, tobacco, or whatever. You could work in big pharma and you could argue that there are questions of ethics and morality there. For me, it's really about trying not to exacerbate bad habits that humans already have as much as possible. And learning is about having discipline, which literally is the opposite of instant gratification that comes from social media. So I'm literally at war with a generation and a world that has a 15-second attention span or whatever the amount is. And I'm trying to instill in them, discipline, curiosity, critical thinking. And it's an uphill battle because actually nobody wants pain or discomfort or, trying to do things that are hard. So not easy, but I would say where possible, I can see a lot of entrepreneurs in the world that are trying to do good things. So I still think that's the good fight.
So people learn different ways. Like some people learn by actually doing it, some by watching, some by doing things.
Yep.
Why do you think people learn different ways? Things genetics or just like environment? Why do you think that is?
I mean, I'm sure there have been studies on. To be fair, I actually don't know the answer to that question very well. I think.
Well, I'm sure you can give a very good educated guess.
I mean, yeah, I think it's a mix of nature and nurture, as with all things. So I think inherently we have some talents that are given to us, which favors certain ways of learning. So, for example, for me, I love music, so I can hear something and remember it very easily. I'm also more, I would say, a visual learner. So I don't need to do things as much in order to be able to acquire that skill or that knowledge. But then again, the way that we are conditioned to learn in society is still very much about rote memorization for the most part. So, I think the way that we learn generally is based on our innate talents, but is nurtured through the way that society kind of organizes itself, which in the case of most people is going to be doing tests, rote memorization, and practicing it through repetitive kind of means. But one thing is for sure, though, that Practice does make perfect, though. I will say that. You do need to do, I play golf as an example, and golf is probably one of the most frustrating sports because if you distill it down fundamentally, it's a white ball on a piece of grass that you have to hit into a hole a couple hundred yards away. And the most frustrating thing is that even though this ball is flat on this grass, you can almost never hit it perfectly every
It's like the
time.
ball's moving on you.
It's like the ball's moving or your body is doing some weird stuff, and you're just like, damn, like why can't I? Like I've practiced this 10,000 times, but I still can't hit it perfectly every time. And even pros can't do it. So, well, or they can at a much higher degree, but even they are not at 100%. So I think the main takeaway is that regardless of how you learn, repetition is always going to be a required skill, a required it's a required thing to be able to nurture or practice or to learn anything. I can tell you with 100% certainty that part though will always be required, whether you are a visual learner, an auditory learner, whether you need to, do it on the job or whatever. I guarantee you will need to do it 10,000 times, 100,000 times in order to be good at it. But practice itself is not enough. You have to do practice in an intelligent way. And this is actually an analogy that like my dad likes to use is he has, let's use this hypothetical example. You have two people who learn to play golf. One guy goes to the driving range and plays 10,000 balls, plays okay. And the other guy also hits 10,000 balls. But the difference between these two is that one guy takes lesson, gets feedback from a coach, and actually tries to tweak and improve little by little, versus the other guy is just hitting 10,000 balls and watching maybe YouTube videos, but maybe aren't necessarily what he needs. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it's practice, but with intelligent feedback and coaching that allows you to know what you're doing wrong. Because sometimes we practice, but we don't even know what we're doing wrong, which means we can't improve. So it's really that mix of practice with getting that feedback loop to really improve in whatever way you like to learn best.
So obviously, I can't speak about education in Vietnam or other places, but in the United States, especially the high school below level, a lot of people equate like education with bureaucracy, bureaucratic.
Mm.
Like it's like the school administrator more concerned about the bureaucratic process versus
Yep.
teaching kids. Like, how do we get to this point? How do we improve that? You think?
I think we have to remove the politics and agendas from classrooms. I think we have to let teachers do their jobs, which is to teach. Like you said, I think today, I think most teachers would agree that probably 50% of their job is admin work, which is not what a teacher should be doing, really. So how do we remove that? I think we need to. Technology can help, but that's actually not really the main impediment to teachers' frustrations. I think teachers' frustrations are they're not trained enough, they're not paid enough, they're not given the liberty to do their jobs. Everything kind of gets shoved down their throat, and they're just kind of basically just repeating an agenda to their kids. So I think we have to just do a better job of removing all these. I mean, it's kind of like what Elon Musk is trying to do with his Doge department in the U.S. government, right? Whether you agree with his politics or not, I think generally cutting down on bureaucracy is generally a good thing. I don't think anybody in the world would say we need more bureaucracy. I love waiting in line for hours to get my paperwork done. No, we need good frameworks in place to make sure that there's no like there still needs to be some, I guess, controls in place. Obviously, it shouldn't be a free for all, but as far as education is concerned, many real teachers have already been certified. They know how to teach. Just don't shove, useless stuff down their throats. It literally helps nobody. And then it translates down to the kids who are not getting the best experience that they should be getting. And then parents are frustrated because their kids aren't learning what they should be learning. So it really just creates this loop that is never ending. So I think you're right. We have to start at the top. We have to let educators do what they do best, which is teaching and educating, and we leave the admin to actual, bureaucracy folks, pencil pushers and document peddlers and whatever.
Yeah.
We let them. If they love, I mean, there are people who like to do that. Like I could never do accounting or admin work, but some people love that. So let's just give that to them, and let's just leave the education to the educators. That's my view.
And so for your company, you're building out your own AI capabilities.
We are starting to build our own AI
So
capabilities.
so
Yep.
why do that, right? Why not like just jump on like ChatGPT or one of the other models? Why user resources, time, et cetera, to build it internally?
Great question. So there's two main reasons for that. Well, actually, to be perfectly transparent, actually we did use OpenAI's AI technology in the beginning, but we mainly used that as a proof of concept, just to validate that what we were building made sense. The reason why we're building our own AI models is because we're actually not building a large language model, we're building a small language model. And the advantage of a small language model is that it can outperform a large language model at very specific tasks. So let me give you an example. Today, if you use ChatGPT, for example, to do a sales role play, it can do it in a very generic way. But what we are building using a small language model will be cheaper and a lot more specialized and a lot more accurate in the way that it will be able to give feedback or help the learner to do whatever it is that they need to do. So language models are very good for very generalist things. Like if it's kind of, you can think of it like as an encyclopedia in a way. It knows a lot about lots of things. It's like Wikipedia. But if you want to know something very specific about something, or if you want the AI to be very good at something very specific, sometimes it's better to get a cookbook on how to cook steak than it is to get a cookbook on how to cook 100 different recipes. And in this case, we are writing the cookbook only for a specific skill set or a specific thing, which we think will work better. And it will also be more affordable in the long term for our clients as well.
And are you like, you have internal people doing this for you? You're outsourcing this? How are you going about that?
Bit of both. So AI capabilities in Vietnam are still a little bit more limited. Not to say that there isn't very good AI talent here, but it's kind of on the rise. So we do have advisors that are external to the company who, you know, are from the US and other places who have a lot of AI experience, but most of the development that we do in-house with our team in Vietnam.
So next, so I don't think a lot of people in America have been in Vietnam. Actually, I don't know how many people from the war have been in Vietnam. So what's something about Vietnam that you'd want people to know about Vietnam?
Sure. I think even not just Vietnam, but Asia in general, is that Asia is catching up like Southeast Asia is catching up very, very quickly to the rest of the world. You know, most people, when they think about, like you said, you know, in the very beginning, when people think about Vietnam or whatever, Thailand or whatever, they think, you know, rice fields and people on buffaloes or whatever living in huts. But man, like, you know, buildings are growing like mushrooms here. I've lived here now for 8 years. When I came here, it was probably like 30% cars and like 70% bikes. And now that's being skewed in the opposite direction. Now everybody has a car, or more and more people have cars. People are, you know, real estate is exploding, or well, actually lately real estate's not doing so hot, but it was exploding in the past. Yeah, I would just say, you know, in the West, we've kind of become quite docile in that regard. We think that, you know, these guys are still living in their huts, but actually, you know, Asia is coming. This is the century, I think, of Asia where they're really exploding. China has had a couple of very good decades in the past. Okay, maybe China's having their own problems right now, but now, you know, we have India that's on the rise. Southeast Asia is on the rise. I think in the West, we should not look down on Southeast Asia because they work very hard. They're very ambitious. They mean well, but they're also extremely driven. And so in France, for example, most people don't work more than 35 hours in general. Like that's a French thing. But in Vietnam, like people will work 80, 100 hours because they're investing in the future, making sure that their kids will never have to sleep on the floor or whatever it is. And you can't compete with people who have that drive if you're going to be like, you know, very docile and just kind of lay back and think that everything's great on your end. Europe's already falling behind. Everybody that I talk to when we go back to Europe, we're like, it's a very nice museum. You know, you live great. Okay, yeah, food's great. Living conditions are fantastic, but it's not the center of innovation and it's not moving anymore. But they don't realize that on this side of the world, there are people working their butts off to, you know, live that better life. And they have no problem to work their ass off to take your place. And they will at some point, maybe not today, but in, you know, 10, 20 years, you know, I think this is the century of Asia.
Yeah, 20 years, everyone in France are like, How do our French companies become Vietnamese companies?
Yeah, exactly, right?
When did this
And I
happen?
mean, there's one of my clients is called FPT, and they've been buying up a bunch of French companies, and it's starting to happen. Like there's a lot of Asian investments that are coming to Europe. If you look at London, most of London doesn't even, everything is starting to be bought up. French vineyards are being bought by the Chinese. So you can't be complacent in this future where people are
Just
winning.
imagine all those French winery people from hundreds of years ago rolling over the grave.
Exactly. Yeah. They're like, oh, yeah, these Chinese. Yeah, but the reality is, your descendants didn't work their butts off to keep your legacy in place. You let them die. So if the West wants to continue competing with these emerging markets, we're going to have to think differently and approach differently. In Europe, we are the champions of regulation. We regulate everything, but we don't build anything new.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's a bit of a generalization. We have some good
It's
companies,
pretty damn close to the
but for
truth.
the most part, right? Nobody says nobody goes to Europe to start a company these days. Like it's not the thing. Nobody says that. Everybody says go to Asia, go set up in Bali, go live in Dubai or whatever. Go to China, learn Chinese, go learn Mandarin. Nobody says learn French, unless you're kind of antiquated or whatever. But I mean, there are some advantages to learning French, but learning French sucks. Wouldn't recommend it. But anyways, but I think you get the point, right?
Yeah, yeah. So one thing that kind of took me by surprise when I came in September last year, and this time, like how there's just this vibe here, like shit's happening, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You just sense the hustle,
there's an energy.
There's energy, right?
Yeah.
Has this always been like this here, or is it something like recent occurrence, or?
I think. I mean, I think I haven't been around here long enough to really know that, but definitely for the last 8 years that I've been here, it's definitely been the case. And I think when Vietnam implemented some of their policies, I can't tell you the exact dates, but essentially when Vietnam started to open up, I think that's really when I started acknowledging Vietnam. But I think, the Vietnamese have suffered historically, like they've had hard lives. And I think that's also why they're so driven to live better lives. And I think that's why they have that entrepreneurial drive to want to do better, live better, and so on. So I think that's here to stay. It's definitely been that way since I've been here. And that's exactly why I stayed, actually.
So what's your advice to someone who wants to come here and open a company here?
I think now's a great time, to be honest. I think the challenges, though, are going to be more cultural in terms of how to do business in Vietnam. So there are, the nuances of you need to have good relationships or have some relationships or people who have relationships who can help you get your paperwork done faster or who can navigate getting you the right licenses and things like that. But there are experts and people who you can find who can help you to do that. That's really, I think, the main challenge is more the bureaucracy in Vietnam in terms of setting up a business. But once you've done that, honestly, it's pretty easy to go after that.
So back to your company, looking forward 5 years, what needs to happen if you say, okay, my company has been a success, whatever that success term means to you?
Sure. I mean, for me, financials are important. Like for any company, if you don't make enough money, you die. But again, I think with my co-founder, we started this business because we wanted to do something good. So for us, when we started this business, we wanted to set out on a mission to have a positive impact on the lives of 1 million folks around the world. And for us, positive impact means that we've helped them to learn something, advance in their careers, or acquire new sets of skills, something that they will find beneficial to their own ends. So that's been our mission. So even to tomorrow, touch wood, that's not the case. But if I die tomorrow, at least I would say I tried to do something good. I put in my best efforts, and I think I lived a pretty good life, honestly, so far, and I would have no regrets. But in the next 5 years, if we can do what we're doing now and go from 200,000 to 1 million and 5x that would be fantastic. I would be very proud of that.
So what needs to happen in the next 5 years for you to say, okay, we fucked this up, our business failed? What happens?
That's a good question. To be honest, I don't think that would ever happen, because even if it's not a huge financial success and we had to close our doors, I still think the positive impact that we've had on the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of folks that we've helped, I think for me is meaningful enough And I think as an entrepreneur, what you learn from running a business is very valuable. And so I'm pretty sure I'd find a job or whatever, or work in another startup. I'd find a way. So I would be more sad if I couldn't fulfill my vision in terms of doing the impact that I want to have. More so than closing. Like, it wouldn't bother me if I closed because we ran out of money. But at least if I was trying to do a good job, then I give it my best shot, move on to the next thing, and we'll figure it out from there.
Can you tell us what you do for fun, or like what some of your hobbies are?
Sure. Well, I work a lot, first of all. I do enjoy my work, so that is fun. But in terms of extracurriculars, I do a lot of motorcycling. On the weekends, I will wake up at 5 a.m. and go for like an 8-10 hour ride with friends by the beach in the middle of the rice fields and whatever, and discover the country and just kind of listen to music and zone out. So that's fun. Otherwise, I mean, I mentioned I play a little bit of golf. I mean, Vietnam is really fun. There's so many things to do. We go out eating a lot. I need to lose some weight, but that's, food is a blessing and a curse here because there's a lot of good food. Um, the usual stuff, going out, meeting out with friends, making music, things like that. Sure.
So next question, like, how do you take care of yourself, like mentally, physically, spiritually? How do you make sure like you take care of yourself?
Yeah. So I was actually very bad at that the first couple of years. I did not. I gained like a ton of weight. I was very unhealthy. So what I did was I forced myself to take more breaks. Because before, when I was working, I would feel guilty if I was like, a client would send a message, and if I didn't answer immediately, I would feel bad. Now I'm grateful that I have a team who can help me do that. So now I force myself to take every month at least a long weekend, maybe one or two if I'm lucky. When I go on a holiday, I really try to turn off my phone. I really try not to look at it, and I try to tell my clients in advance. I try to do more exercise, more sports. So that's why I go, cycling. I go riding, bikes with my friends, because that's really the time when we get to disconnect. Because when you're riding a bike, you can't just answer your phone call or whatever.
Or at least hopefully you're not anyway, huh?
No, yeah, yeah, correct. And I wouldn't want to anyways. So yeah, eating, I think most entrepreneurs, we try to kill ourselves in the beginning. We think that that's the grind, but actually the grind is that's not even the real thing we need to do. What we need to do is make sure that we endure so that the company can endure and we can make tough decisions when we need to, and that we have the mental and physical capacity to do so. So yeah, I try in Vietnam. Actually, what I did now is I try to get a massage every week. It's $20 versus a couple $100 in the West, so that's nice. Try to spend time with family. Yeah, just go outdoors. I try to leave the city because actually Ho Chi Minh City, unfortunately, can get quite polluted. So sometimes I try to go out and breathe some fresh air at the beach, and Vietnam is blessed with 2,000 kilometers of coast, so that helps. So
yeah. So when dealing with anything in general, like potential customers, your employees, or in life in general, how do you go about telling people no when you need to?
I think I've generally been good at telling people no. I think that's been one of my strengths. I think though a lot of entrepreneurs are scared to disappoint people by saying no, but actually I find that saying okay, so usually my default answer for things that I don't consider important and urgent is almost always no. Like, that is usually my default answer. Um, I will usually say yes, though, if I can learn from it, or I find it meaningful for the person that I'm doing that thing with. But as I'm sure you know as well, being an entrepreneur is about prioritizing your time, prioritizing your things that you need to do. So that's why, unfortunately, I'm default no. And I'm French, so to a certain degree, I'm pretty good at saying no already, because French people are snobs. So
So I'm pretty sure your day is different each day, but in general terms of what's a day in your life like?
Sure. So first of all, sleep. I love to sleep, so I try to do at least my 8 hours every night. I'm quite religious about So typically my typical day is I'll try to go to bed around midnight. Usually I'll wake up around maybe 8 a.m. ish. Um, I start off my day by, at least I try to be, when possible, I try to wake up grateful for the life that I have and the things that I've done. Then it's a bad habit, but I don't eat breakfast, so I go straight into work. So usually I'll start work, like proper work, at around 9. I'll spend 8 to 9 just kind of chilling and getting in the mood. And then I will usually get lunch, do my work. Yeah, lunch. Actually, I like to take my sweet time for lunch. I don't usually like to have a quick lunch. And then I'll try to finish work around 6:30, 7 p.m. Where possible. Sometimes I'll work later, but that's usually not the goal. And then throughout my day, really, my job is to make sure that my team, I try to facilitate their life as much as possible. So I'm here to help make important decisions. I'm here to advance initiatives. I'm not here to micromanage. I'm not here to annoy anybody. I'm just here to make sure that they can do their best work and I can do my best work as well. And very importantly, I usually try to carve out at least a couple hours a day where I do something that I find fun.
So what's something that you do now like is super easy,
Mm,
but back in the day when you got started, like it kind of kicked your butt, right? And now you're like,
mm,
man, how did this kick my butt back? This is so freaking easy.
mm.
What took me so long to figure this easy thing out?
Um, Man, there's a lot of things. This might sound very negative, but in the beginning, letting somebody go was extremely hard. It would take up, like, literally, I would get anxiety for a couple of weeks if I had to, unfortunately, let somebody go. Now it's not so much that, it's still an emotional process, and by no means is it ever easy. But usually, my approach is a lot more, how to say it? It's a lot more direct in that, usually, I'm not here to shame anybody or make anybody feel bad, but I'm usually, my approach is like, look, man, this isn't working, or we need to either find a solution, or unfortunately, maybe this is not the right fit, and maybe that reason is not your fault. Maybe I put you in the wrong position or in the wrong job or whatever. I gave you the wrong responsibility, so I take ownership for that. But this isn't working. So I think, you know, hiring and firing has become easier. And it's not to say that that's a good thing. Sometimes I don't think it's a good thing as well. But I think I've grown thicker skin. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is getting rejected. As I mentioned to you at the beginning of this call, I think I've been rejected by hundreds of investors over time. So rejection in the beginning was more personal. Now, honestly, I take it as feedback, and as actually, if anything, if somebody is willing to give me the feedback and the reasons for rejection, usually actually I'm quite grateful, because then I know what I can improve, which is much better than when somebody just ghosts you and doesn't tell you anything or gives you any feedback. So I think that I've gotten a lot more familiar with rejection. I think, a much better manager now than I used to be before. And I try to separate my work from my life. And what I mean by that is, I don't put myself down if I'm not doing well at work. I don't let that affect me personally, in that it's not, it's just, sometimes that's just life and that's business. I can still be a good person and not do so well at my job some days, but that's okay. So I think those are kind of three areas where I think I've improved over time. Still by no means easy, but I think I've gotten better with that over time.
So all I'm here right now, I'm trying my best, like meeting as many people as I can, go to networking events. Like you mentioned RMIT earlier.
Hmm.
I think they're doing a pitch competition December 2nd, 3rd I'm going
Okay,
to.
cool.
Or they need like networking or any kind of events you could recommend that I should go check out.
Sure. So I have a good friend, who's a partner, owns a co-working space called The Century. So they organize a ton of events for networking for folks in the startup world and the tech world and so on. So they're very hands-on. I mean, in general, in Vietnam, there are different tech conferences, startup conferences happening pretty much every month. So to be honest, you could go to any of those. It would be an interesting time. VCs, maybe not as much as they used to be, but still organize quite a lot of events as well. I mean, here you're talking to Earth VC. So those folks organize a lot of events. Personally, I don't go to Chamber of Commerce events or things like that. Those are for more like, I call them the big boys, big companies, more mature. But for kind of entrepreneurs, apparently there's a lot of opportunities to go to these networking events. So the stuff that you mentioned, there used to be events called Tech After Dark, which was basically where everybody goes to drink and hangs out at these different co-working. Just stay on the lookout for those. There's a lot happening.
So I'm guessing if you could recommend one restaurant for me to go eat at, what would that one restaurant be?
Okay. I'm going to put my sales hat on right now and come back to you with questions.
Okay.
So what type of food do you usually enjoy?
Usually Italian food.
Italian food.
Yeah, usually. But here I want to like eat food here, Like
Okay.
I'm a big fan of how you would say the name. Like
Sure.
I'm for anything,
Okay. And do you care more about the food itself, or is it more about the experience? Like, what type of foodie are you?
Oh man, that's a good question. I guess it depends who I'm with. If it's by myself, I don't care about the ambience. I just want to eat good
Okay.
food,
It's okay.
Like I could be like on a chair in the middle of an alleyway,
Okay.
eating good food,
Okay. Okay. So maybe some other folks have already talked to you about this if you've asked this question before, but there is one. So you mentioned Italian. So there is a very good fusion Japanese Italian called Pizza 4Ps, which is very famous here. Maybe you've been. There are other fusion restaurants similar to that as well that have done well. There's one close to where I live on Fambiachan called Kakinoki, which is very good. So it's again kind of niche Japanese Italian fusion, which surprisingly go very well together. Personally, I'm not a person who likes like fine dining, so I can't really advise you on that spectrum. I like to eat food that is substantial. So one of the restaurants that I discovered coming to Vietnam, so I am by no means a vegetarian or a vegan, but there is an excellent vegetarian restaurant called Hum, Hum, which is very good, which is a kind of Asian vegetarian food, but it is surprisingly very good. What else? Where do I usually eat? It's a difficult question. That is a difficult question because there's a lot of good restaurants here. Mm,
There's definitely a lot of good food here.
yeah, I'm trying to think. So for pho, actually, there's a place here called Pho Hang Do that I go to in Thao Dien district, which is very good. If you want French restaurant, well, but French maybe it's not so exotic to Vietnam specifically. There is a restaurant by the river also in this district called Satsuma, which belongs to some friends, which has a very nice view of the river and landmark 81. Then there are, there are famous, more upscale restaurants. Like one is like An, which is like a Michelin star one, which is famous for Vietnamese food, but that's not really my vibe personally.
Okay.
I prefer to eat at slightly more local.
More street food, so to speak.
It doesn't have to be street food, but slightly more local places than kind of those kind of more upscale places. Like I like more authentic food. Let's put it that way.
So people don't know Ho Chi Minh City is divided like districts. I think there's 10 districts. Like District 1 is like the tourist area pretty much. One District 2, a lot of foreigners live. So I've been like District 1 already, obviously District 2. I've been in District 4 and District 3. Is there a district I should go to? To spend a day in?
Good question. I mean, you're right. Every districts have different aspects to them. So for example, if you were to go to District 7, it's kind of like a mini Singapore slash, it's very modern. It's a very modern district, but it doesn't feel like Ho Chi Minh City. I think in terms of, I mean, you've done most of them, to be honest. Where would I go? District 5, you can get good dim sum and Chinese food. It's quite local. I mean, you've done most of the core one. District 1 is not necessarily a tourist district per se. I mean, it's the CBD, so that's where most of the bars and the restaurants will be. District 3 is where my office is. It's a mix of residential and work, but the buildings tend to be a bit more traditional in the sense of like you have these older colonial, not really colonial, but like French influenced architecture and buildings. No major recommendations for districts, but I would recommend other places for you to visit in Vietnam though, if you have the time in the future.
Definitely.
So one place I think that's very popular with Vietnamese is a town called Dalat, which is in the mountains, which also has a lot of French influence. At the beach, there are lots of lovely places. Hoi An is a very touristy, but it is a very famous place, and it is nice. For me personally, I prefer to go to Hue, or Con Dao, or even Phu Quoc, which is like an island in the south of Vietnam, similar to Phuket in Thailand. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Um, so, but yeah, Vietnam has lots of beautiful places, and if I can suggest, if you know how to ride a bike, even better. Do you ride a bike?
No, not for a long time. Yeah, not for a
Okay.
long time. Yeah. Um, so you already talked about your company some, but can you go in more detail how the company got started, what you're focused on now, and what you see as a vision for your company?
Sure. We originally started as a B2C online tutoring business. So we were in Vietnam. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Vietnamese market has a very big emphasis on learning English because they see English as the gateway to being able to travel, get a better job, go to other countries, and so on. Basically, upward mobility. So we started with that. We started with the English for kids with soft skills, and we grew that to $1 million business plus minus, but it wasn't growing as quickly as we wanted, and the unit economics of the business were could have been better. So that's why at some point we were approached by a large education group who was interested in acquiring us. This was right before and during COVID, so around 2019, 2020. And the reason they wanted to buy us was because they liked the technology that we had built. They liked that we had, a presence online because they had been historically offline. But the deal terms were not very interesting, to be honest. Essentially, they wanted to buy us using stock, and just the general terms were not great. But the epiphany that we had was that it made us realize, okay, if a company is ready to buy us for us being able to offer these things, then perhaps we are solving a bigger problem. And so that's kind of how we pivoted from becoming a B2C company to becoming a B2B company. So that's where we are today. So we pivoted. Now we've built a learning management system for enterprise companies, both for education companies and for corporate. And yeah, our vision, like I mentioned, is really to exit in the next 2 years, have a positive impact on 1 million folks, and bettering and improving their lives through learning. And then yeah, that's it. I'll take the paycheck and chill a bit and maybe start a new business after.
So how long has your longest customer been with you?
It's been almost 3 years now. Yeah, 3 years.
And
Well, since we pivoted. So basically, they were our first client,
they're still with you?
and they're still with us today.
And what do you think that is? What do you think you did the right way to have them stay with you so long?
So I think, there's two aspects of it. Number one, when you provide a learning management system to an education company, your learning management system is essentially their brain and their heart. So if you remove that, they're kind of screwed in a way, or it's very hard to switch it over. Um, I think we've done a good job overall meeting their needs and requirements and helping the business deliver value overall. Today, they have 50,000 users just from them on our platform, using our stuff. And over time, they've been increasing those numbers. So I think that's generally a sign of good engagement and that these guys are happy. And I think, it goes back to what we mentioned at the very beginning. I think we were very hands-on because we were more boutique. We were able to offer a level of personalization and customer service that was superior to some of our competitors. And we still operate in that way even today for them. So I think they appreciate that. And I think, touch wood, they'll be sticking around for another 3-4 years.
So for this one, like pick the demographic you want for this, but like anyone from like an early stage startup idea on a napkin to entrepreneur with maybe 100 customers, right? Like pick anyone in that realm, in that scope. What would your advice to that person be?
Good question. I think there's a couple pieces of advice that I would give. I think it's important to have a clear vision, but to be flexible in how you achieve that vision. I think a lot of founders tend to have one idea and kind of want to stick to that and kind of ride or die kind of situation where they're willing to go all the way for it. That's one area. Another area is related to that is that I think founders typically don't test their concepts enough in order to check whether there is a real need. So oftentimes they'll have an idea. I'm not saying it's a bad idea per se, but they rarely actually check if that is a real problem or a real thing that somebody is willing to pay money for. And oftentimes people are like, hey, I have 10,000 users, but I'm like, okay, out of those 10,000 users, is anybody actually paying money for it? And sometimes the answer is no. And I'm like, you should probably check whether anybody is willing to pay for that, because it's very different having a free user rather than having a paid user. It's a very different set of requirements and expectations. And number three, I would say something that is, I've mentioned, I think earlier today, is please learn sales, or learn how to tell stories, learn how to convince. If you don't like the word sales, you can replace it with persuasion, influencing, negotiation, whatever the word it is that you prefer. But I really think a lot of founders kind of think that they're going to build this magical product, build it, and they will come. And if you're very lucky, sometimes that does happen. But for 99.9% of the rest of us, that doesn't happen. So I would say learn that skill, practice it a ton, because in the early stages of your company, you cannot delegate sales to somebody. It doesn't work. It's going to be founder-led sales in the beginning, whether it's B2B or B2C. You are the face of your company. Nobody knows your product in and out like you do. Nobody knows it. Therefore, you have to do get the first contracts, first clients, and then you build a repeatable go-to-market strategy based on your experiences with an actual sales team after that, but not before.
So it's like the entrepreneurs, we get all this advice from people, right? Now, I'm not saying it's never bad intention. Most of the time it's good intentions, but
for sure,
a lot of times advice, it's good for them back in 1985.
Absolutely.
It's good different. So how do you personally, how do you sift through all the advice you got to pick the ones that really took care of you, so to speak?
To be honest, you'll never really know if it's good or bad advice until you apply it. The reality is that it's a lot of breaking things and figuring stuff out along the way. I think, though, as entrepreneurs, one thing that we develop over time is a good gut. And what I mean by that is, like you said, we're going to get a ton of information. And at the end of the day, we're just going to have to make a call. And that call is going to have to be based on our gut instinct, on our feelings. And it's not always going to be logical. Sometimes you just have to go with your gut, really. And if it doesn't work, fail fast and then try again. Really. I don't really have a recipe beyond that.
And how you deal with all the vendors you get? Like me, I get I'm making this up, 1,000 emails every day, vendors. I'm like, dude, I'm not gonna have somebody from Bangladesh do my, sales for me, right?
Sure.
How you just delete them? How do you because sure, some of them be actually value add to you. So how
yeah, for sure. So as a salesperson, I have a lot of empathy for salespeople that I know that their job is very hard. I will very rarely ignore them unless I literally I do get hundreds of emails a day, but where possible, I do try to give feedback and answer, even if it's as simple as look, I get approached all the time for IT outsourcing. And I'm like, look, guys, I have an in-house team. Thank you, but no, thank you. But where possible, I actually literally try to give advice to these young salespeople, usually who don't have that much experience. I'm like, maybe you could have tried this angle and it would have worked better. I'm not saying we're going to work together, but if you had to do it again, this is the approach that maybe I would have advised you to take. So where possible, I try to answer politely. The worst ones are the people where you politely decline and then they keep coming back at you. And then sometimes I get annoyed. I'm just like, look, man, I thought I was very clear that, we're not looking for your services. Again, please don't spam me. Otherwise, I am going to have to block you or whatever. But where possible, I try to come from empathy.
Well, one time this IT company reached out to me and said, we want to do a software development. I said, at the time I had my own internal people. I told them that these motherfuckers replied, we appreciate that, but we're confident our people are better than yours.
Oh yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, like, but that's,
Are you kidding me right now?
you know, that's not a, yeah, and that's an example of not good sales, right?
Yeah.
Sales is about building trust, adding value, and helping. Really, sales is about helping at the end of the day. So making your client lose face is the surest way to lose a deal by
Yeah.
far.
And like, I appreciate automation because I think you have to use automation sometimes, but like
Sure.
if you're trying to sell HR and it has HR in my company name,
Yeah,
like,
sure.
do some kind of like, initial something, right?
Yeah, do your research. Like if you're gonna, and that's what I try to instill in my sales team. It's like, I don't want you to do any messaging that isn't specific to this client.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can copy paste your email for another client, you failed at your job.
Yeah.
Like that is not the right approach. And I'm not asking you to write paragraphs on the company. I'm just telling you to write 2 sentences that are going to add value and
Like do
also
some
interest
basic
your
research.
client. And do your basic
Go to
research.
LinkedIn at a minimum.
It's like if you go on a date, right? Like the analogy is always dating for me. It's if you're gonna go meet this girl or a guy, whatever floats your boat, right? You're gonna make sure that you do a bit of your homework. Like, hey, I'll take you to this restaurant because I think you like Italian food, or like, hey,
But on her Instagram it says, "I went to this restaurant, worst experience ever."
yeah. So you don't bring them
you
there,
might not want to go there,
right? And sales is exactly the same thing. So like, you do your research on the person you're gonna message. You talk like a human. You don't get AI to do everything for you. It's okay if it looks like it's not 100%, polished, but at least I need to feel like it's for me. And which is the case, which is usually not the case.
Yeah. So how do you do that, right? I mean, everyone says personalized, you need to do, but even do a couple of sentences, it takes some time.
Yeah,
time. It's like we say 10 seconds time, 100 reach outs. Like, how do you like balance that?
So I think for us, because we focus on enterprise and like large accounts, we do a lot of like account-based approaches. So for us, it's not so much about volume as it is about targeting at the right time, at the right place with the right people. Now I confess it takes time. But I would rather that my sales team sends 10 really good emails a day than 50 really shitty ones.
Yeah.
So like I always emphasize to my team, please put in the effort, put in the time, payback. But it's not also just about writing emails and messaging. These days, with AI, everybody thinks everything's spam technically or is made up. So what I've been told my team is, look, you also need to demonstrate value by demonstrating that you are experts in your field. And yeah, some of you guys are more introverted. Maybe you don't like social media or whatever, but find the angle that works best for you. So in your case, for example, like, you're doing this blog. I feel like, maybe this is your channel. This is how you like to build rapport with clients and get people to interface with you. So I tell my team the same thing. Maybe for you, it's writing. Maybe you like to make videos. Maybe you like to make funny memes. Whatever it is that you are comfortable and good at that is going to speak to your clients and add value, that's okay. But just find your whatever works for you, basically.
Yeah, like me, I hate talking on the phone, right?
I hate talking on the phone.
I'd rather like fall butt ass naked through barbed wire with fire than talking on the phone.
Same. Agreed. And today also, like, the phone. So lots of salespeople say the phone is still in a very effective way, and I would agree to a certain degree. But decisions now are not just made on the phone. People are going to more likely to react with you if they've seen you, if that they see that you're a specialist, an influencer, or whatever. Like, I don't know how you found me, but clearly there was maybe something on my LinkedIn that you thought, okay, this is maybe interesting to have a chat when I'm in Vietnam. So same thing for my team. I'm like, you guys need to establish yourselves as experts, as credible, and therefore you need to put yourself out there. So whether that's a blog, whether that's going to events, whether that's going to a cocktail party, whatever, I don't care, so long as you find your jam and you make the most of that channel.
So this is my pet peeves too. And I know people don't mean it like in a negative way, but like, of course, I post a lot of stuff across social media, and I do a clip on whatever, and someone will put, "Hey Jason, nice content. What do you think about XYZ?" My mind already think, dude, I know you're trying to sell me something.
Sure.
Just get to the fucking point.
Sure.
I don't have fucking time. Like go through like 4 or 5 LinkedIn or whatever exchange, right? Just say, you found me, whatever, you're selling this, right?
Yeah.
I don't have the bandwidth of mind, whatever you want to say, that
correct, because we're getting inundated with like messages and stuff these days. So I mean, I'm absolutely
like, I know they don't mean anything about it. That's the way they do sales and processes. But like, I know what they say, like build a relationship, build a conversation. Me personally, like,
Mhm.
man, I ain't got time for that shit. That's like,
Correct.
tell me what you want.
It's like, give me value first, and then I'll figure out whether or not I actually give a shit about this or
Yeah.
not. So I mean, I agree with you, and it works both ways. It works also to save the salesperson's time, like you're not beating around the bush. Like I have a lady who I've very politely told, I think at least 3 times, to stop sending me rubbish stuff. She still keeps doing it, and I'm just interested to see how long that's going to take for her to
Yeah.
realize that it's
I
not
mean,
working.
some people say like follow up. I mean, you already told them no, so that's a bad thing. But I know a lot of people say follow up 1,000 times until you say no. But you already said no, so
I mean, yeah, I would say you can nurture somebody by giving them, it's the principle of inbound marketing, right? You offer value and then you nurture them, but there's a difference between nurturing and fucking spamming me, right?
yeah.
You
And
know,
it's a fine line too,
uh,
right?
yeah, it's a fine line too, and that line is not so easy to distinguish. But for us, I think in our sequencing, I think after 5 messages or something, if they don't answer, what we say is like, look, doesn't seem like it's the best fit. Let us know if this is not, whatever. I forget exactly what we put, but basically it's a nice breakup
Yeah.
email of messaging of sorts, where it's just like, look, I'm not going to bother you anymore.
Yeah.
And even when we message, usually our approach is actually we use ABCDE whatever messaging. And what I mean by that is that when we send a message, we, instead of a prospect answering like lines of text or whatever, they literally will just say like, oh, A is like, okay, give me more info. B is like, I'm not interested, but contact me later. C is just like, fuck off. And so we save time for folks to
Yeah.
be able to not have to do that.
One thing I need to do a better job at, that's me being lazy, is like, I'll get these like emails, whatever.
Yeah.
I'll just delete them. I think like you said, I need to do a better job at just saying no, thank you, right?
Yeah.
They are trying their best to do, but sometimes
Yeah.
I see it, I just delete it. I need to do a better job at least saying, hey, no, thank
To be
you.
fair, I don't do that for all of them, but if I have the time and the mental capacity to do it, I will try to be nice.
Yeah.
But I agree. Sometimes it's hard.
Are there like specific tools you use for like sales or emails, like Apollo IO or Close.com
Uh,
or Salesforce or anything?
yeah, good question. So we use Pipedrive as our CRM. We use Apollo IO for lead gen as well as sales nav, typical stuff. But what we do a little bit differently, I think, is we also use other kind of automated tools. But those automated tools, okay, so we use on LinkedIn, we use a tool that allows us to have more profiles without having real people necessarily.
Yeah.
But we try to do it in a way that is as human as possible. So you have automation tools, but most of the time, the way people use automation tools is that they'll just try to cut manual work rather than make the tool scale what they're doing well. So we use these other 2 tools. One of them is called HeyReach, and the other tool is I forgot the other one, the LinkedIn one. But essentially, these tools allow us to replicate what a normal sales would do, but at scale. So instead of having 3 or 4 or 5 SDRs equivalent, it's like I have the equivalent of 50 now. But the messaging and the stuff we do is as human as possible, because you don't want to take that approach and then it's basically just spam again. So where possible, again, we try to make these messagings as personalized or whatever, as human as possible.
So how have you utilized Sales Navigator? Because I personally, I don't think any tool is frustrating more than use Sales Navigator. I don't think it has so much potential, but they
It's
refuse.
lost. Yeah,
It's like, well,
yeah.
for this person, me, like I'll sign for Sales Navigator, I'll submit to someone, and a month later, someone messaged me back. But I don't access it because the Sales Navigator is off my computer.
Yeah,
and if you rebuy it, all the shit's gone, right?
Yeah, that's true. Same frustrations. I don't have any anything special to add.
I mean, the search function is like fabulous.
Yeah. But the thing that we did to kind of streamline that is we use that other tool that I mentioned, like HeyReach, which basically we have a ton of sales nav accounts. And the nice thing is that the HeyReach account provides us a universal inbox where we can track all the messaging across all these different accounts that we're using. So that helps a little bit, but there's still the same problems.
Yeah, that's something too. Don't tell me an entrepreneur, like all the time you have to waste. I don't say waste. All the time you have to use going through all these tools to find the right one for you. There's literally thousands of like all these tools, right?
Correct.
And how do you pick one? Do you just pick the one where they email you and
you
do a
would
sales call for
and
you?
you would think that after the billions, hundreds of billions of dollars spent on these tools annually, that somebody would just figure out a thing that connects all of them. I guess you could make the argument that's what Zapier and stuff
Yeah.
do, but yeah, it's crazy to me that we've had like decades of SaaS and it's still not that great. You know, software still sucks.
Yeah, unfortunately, right.
In certain respects. So yeah, I don't have any, magic answers for that other than we've also spent a ton of time trying to figure out how to connect stuff very painfully. And yeah, I think on sales we use I think 6, 7 different tools at this point, not including marketing. So fun
Yeah,
days.
there's so many tools out there, right? And
Yeah.
even though that's one mistake I made too in the past, where in the past someone would say, "Hey, buy this tool, it's 50% off."
Yeah.
Like, well, I don't need this tool yet, but I can't pass it up.
Yeah.
You're passing shit. I just wasted this amount of money. I never used this freaking tool.
True. Same.
Like
We did the same.
too,
Yeah, we did the same. Yeah, sure. So yeah, guys, if you work in sales, please make us a better tool that connects stuff together. I don't know, but that's something better. Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't asked you yet, or anything else you want to talk about?
I think we've gone around. I'm trying to think. Covered Vietnam, personal life, work. I mean, maybe I can ask you a question. I'm just curious. Okay. Why did you pick Vietnam specifically to come here to do this show?
Okay, so long story. So January 23, so I have a good friend, Kevin. He's from Laos. His wife, Mina's from Vietnam, was born here.
Okay.
So Kevin, he is on my podcast, do the stuff with me, right?
Okay.
So Kevin's last job, he was like at Microsoft, but the CEO did a live stream. He set all the stuff up for him, right?
Okay.
And so January 23, Kevin told me, "Hey, Jason," at the time, Mina was getting a degree in logistics or import trade, something for this college, and they were coming to Vietnam for 2 weeks in September, right? Hey, I'm going to Vietnam with my wife, Mina. Can you come along? Cause I have someone to hang out with. Like, dude, like, ain't gonna know fucking Vietnam. Fuck Vietnam. Vietnam's like, if I had this 100 countries, Vietnam be 102, right? And he asked again in April and then July. And suddenly, like, they were flying September 1st, like August 24th, like, Jason, you dumb motherfucker. Like, when you get a chance to go to some foreign country with like a tour guide, people speak a language.
Yeah, sure.
So I came, like, had a great time, whatever, like, just really enjoyed myself, did all the tourist stuff, went to the beach, all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
And so this time, and so they're actually getting remarried on February 6th, right?
Nice.
So
yeah, I remember.
Yeah, some of the wedding in their wedding. And so they actually got November. They had November 1st. They're for 6 months, right? And he was like, "Man, you should come again. Like, come earlier, right? You do your podcast." They're like, "Oh shit, I should do my podcast." I'm not how entrepreneurial was. I made a connection the last time in September, right? And just went from there. The main reason I'm coming, of course, the main reason for the wedding, also like, so my tech platform, the person building out, like, did a great job, but she got a job as a developer at Walmart. And honestly, I can compete with Walmart salaries, right? So right now I'm trying to find the developers here in Vietnam and meet with people, trying to meet investors, all that kind of stuff.
Maybe we can talk about that. So I think Vietnamese technical talent is strong. I think you'll definitely find very qualified people here at a much more reasonable price. I would say the caveat to that, though, is there is still a certain lack of critical thinking in certain respects. So you need to tell them exactly what you want and how to do it.
So it can't be ABC, it has to be like A.1, A.2.
Yeah, it has to be like, first you do this way, and then this way. And, a good PO, like a PM, will help you with that as well. But in general, Vietnamese education and culture is such that taking initiative is not as natural to them. And so the cheaper labor price is offset by that lack in slight. Okay, but again, things are improving every day, so don't get me wrong. But I would say that that's generally true for junior to mid-level engineers. Senior engineers, though, should have more autonomy and be able to be more proactive. And I think that's also why Vietnam, is today one of the largest IT outsourcing countries, or is emerging to become one of the large. I mean, one of my clients is FPT Software, and they do about $1.2 billion in revenue from IT outsourcing. And they're the ones who are buying French companies and stuff like that all over the world. So I think Vietnam has positioned themselves well in that regard. They've also gotten some of the manufacturing stuff from China over the years, where U.S. China kind of trade wars have pushed manufacturing to other kind of emerging markets, of which Vietnam was a winner. So I think that's working out nicely. So yeah, I mean, in terms of if you want to start a tech business, Vietnam's still a great place. Good engineering talent at affordable prices. Although it has gone up significantly from when I first started here. Before you could find a senior engineer here for $1,000 to $2,000 a month. Now senior engineers are going to be more $2,000 to $4,000. So wage inflation has gone up a fair amount. Still not 200K or whatever in the US, but in the time that I've been here, it's already pretty much doubled, and it's steadily rising every year. And in terms of the kind of VC landscape, I know that I said that I'm bootstrapped, but I do know quite well generally what's going on here on the ground. Over the last couple of years, there have been a lot more funds in Vietnam that have opened up shop, or who have focused on Vietnam or entry into Vietnam, or helping Vietnam companies go to the world. So there are a lot more shops now, but this year and last year, fundraising was very tough.
Yeah, same in the States.
I mean, I think it's everywhere in the world, right? So I was reading an article recently that in Southeast Asia, there's a fundraising drought right now. So basically, it's at an all-time low. But I think if you still are building a great business and you have a good team, I still think you'll find a way to raise money in general. Like money follows.
Yeah. What's frustrating with that, you hear about all this dry powder, like billions, almost trillions of dollars dry powder. Like the money's there. And
money's there, but it's just
like, you have to spend it someday. What are you waiting on, right?
Correct.
It's kind of frustrating.
I know, I absolutely agree. And well, it's because they're getting paid they're getting paid fat assets under management fees. So they're just happy. They're waiting their 2 years, they get their 2%. So, I'm not hating on VCs by any means, but I think Southeast Asia also needs a different approach to investing. So historically, Southeast Asia has approached startup investing in the same way as Silicon Valley. And I think the model in Southeast Asia is not going to be the same. And it's kind of failed in that regard. That's why, we're in a fundraising drought. Even investors themselves are not able to raise funds for new funds. So I think once interest rates start to drop, probably later this year and next year and so on, I think fundraising will start to resume again. But yeah, for now, I think the only solution is to build a real business that makes money, that has good fundamentals, good unit economics. You can't cheat by just burning money anymore. Yeah. So that's also going to bring a new breed of entrepreneur and investors in, I believe.
So my point of view, looking at what I could find your social media, you do a great job of putting yourself out there, right? You go to different events, different networking things.
Why? I hate it, by the way, but I do it.
I'm the same way. Why do you think it's important to you as a CEO to put your face out there, so to speak?
Because I think it goes back to what I shared earlier, that in the very beginning, and even not so much in the beginning, now there's a bigger emphasis on founder-led organizations in general. And what I mean by that is, it's not that we're putting different hats and doing everything anymore, but it's more that you are the face of your company. We're seeing this with like Elon Musk. We're seeing this with Sam Altman, with OpenAI, and a bunch of other companies as well. I think it helps to put a face to the company that people can relate to, rather than this kind of abstract business entity that, okay, yes, maybe you have a mission and a vision, but who's behind that? So I think people these days empathize a lot more with talking to a real person or seeing a real human actually doing things. So that's also kind of the approach that we've taken. Even though, again, I strongly dislike it, but I've learned to be a good extroverted introvert.
Same here, same here. So can you give us your social media or any other ways for people to reach out to you?
LinkedIn is my main one. So yeah, feel free to just search for Cedric Le Quang. Everything else, please leave me alone.
No phone calls.
No phone call. You can text me on WhatsApp, but I'm not going to give out my phone number right here.
Oh, man, that's funny. Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah. Hey, Cedric, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, thanks for doing this. Thanks for bringing Vietnam to the world, and come visit again.
All right. Thanks for listening to Jason Cavness Experience, Ho Chi Minh City Edition. If you're looking to unfuck the earth, contact Earth VC as they want to talk to you. And remember to be great every day.